my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. And man, I'm going to be very, very quick on this little intro segment because I just want to get into today's conversation. I'm really excited about today's guest because I feel like we're talking about something that I haven't really had the opportunity to dive into fully, and it's the idea of health, right? And we've done, topics and shows talking about mental health and all those kinds of things, but I feel like I haven't had the opportunity to really tackle the idea of physical health, right? And the idea of eating well and the positive effects that can have on not only our physical appearance, but the way that we feel in general, just like physically being able to operate in this world, and also how it affects our mental health, like the correlation and connection between, all parts of our body and mind, and also the idea of holistic medicine, right? I think we are trained in this country to just view kind of doctors and prescribing pills and all this stuff as the norm, but there are other schools of thought on healing ourselves and more natural ways of finding that healing and that repair that we're looking for. So I'm really excited to bring on today's guest. She is someone who runs a business that consults people and advises people on how to get into a place of living cleaner and living more in line with nature, and just a really inspiring individual with the risks that she's decided to take in her life, betting on herself and just really, throwing kind of tradition to the wind and following her intuition. She's done it at such a young age. It's been incredibly inspiring. So I'm excited to bring you this conversation today, particularly when we talk about our community. This is the last thing I'll say. I'll just keep the intro short. But the last thing I'll say is, particularly when you talk about our community, we often weren't brought up eating healthy. There's all types of crises that are very much, specific to us. And in general, I think many times for a lot of us, we didn't grow up with the privilege of having the expendable income needed to actually eat healthy and clean, right? And that's another kind of fucked up nature of the world that we live in today, that the food that is god awful and terrible for you is cheaper, and the one that actually would nourish your body in the right way is far more expensive, right? It's the world of the haves and the have-nots. So this is obviously a new concept for a lot of people, myself included. So I'm really excited to just get that knowledge and have this conversation. So without further ado, we'll bring on today's guest, Natalie Ventura, for our Mi Gente segment.
Mi Gente.
Yes, my guest today is a holistic practitioner, also the founder of Garden of Awareness, which offers resources and holistic healing services to assist people on their healing journeys and expand their self-awareness. Natalie Ventura, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. I'm so grateful to get to be here and talk with you.
Yeah, I'm excited. So, like, little behind the scenes story. We met randomly at a coffee shop near my town that I just randomly happened to be popping into, and I heard you and your friend like talking about like all kinds of worldly things. So I had to ask a couple questions, and then it turns out you are a yoga instructor and you have this business and you do all these different things. So I've for a long time wanted to have somebody who's like an expert in like clean eating, healthy living, and also giving a different approach to medicine, because I think obviously in this country in particular, we just go to the doctor, we take to the drugs that they give us, and we assume that that's the only way to kind of heal ourselves.
Yeah.
And particularly when it comes to our community, we've grown up uneducated on food and health in so many different ways. So this is exciting to have somebody who's maybe going to introduce people, including myself, into some different concepts.
Yeah, it's an honor to be able to share all this with you.
I mean, so let's first and foremost talk about what exactly it means to be a holistic practitioner, what you do exactly.
So I did my studies with a few different programs. I've traveled internationally to pursue yoga, but what it means to be like a holistic practitioner is just to embody these practices of wellness and learning that like the way you treat yourself is the way that manifests into your life experience. So if you don't treat yourself with love and care, whether it's through the food you eat, the way you move your body or the way you think,
Right.
that's going to manifest into how your life experience is.
Right.
So when a lot of people are suffering in their lives or there's chaos there that they don't seem to like they're not able to handle, it's reflective of the way that their internal environment is. And things need to shift internally through lifestyle changes in order to take that hold of of your life in that way. And as a practitioner, I embody these practices, and it's my role to be able to teach and share these practices to others so that more people can empower themselves. The world becomes a more loving place.
Right.
It starts inside.
Of course. Yeah. It never ceases to amaze me how much work it is to just be like a happy functioning human being, right? Like to just literally baseline be happy. And I think so many of us don't realize the amount of work that goes into like actually finding fulfillment and finding peace and all these different things. And obviously it starts with your body. This is the vessel that is, taking you to do any of the things that you enjoy doing. So for you, what was kind of like the introduction to you getting into this whole world?
It was after high school. I didn't want to pursue college right away because it just didn't resonate with me, didn't feel aligned.
Yeah.
It felt really forceful, honestly, to like go from high school then to university and like that whole pipeline that they put you through. So I just wanted to decided to do some internal work, some reflective work. I knew I wanted to travel. I wanted to learn, just not in a like college school environment. So I pursued a holistic nutrition course, and that's what introduced me to Eastern medicine. Like traditional Chinese medicine is what I particularly was learning. And it's all about like understanding that our body and our mind are not separate. It's all interconnected.
Right.
So whatever is going on in the body, whether there's some sort of physical imbalance, is going to affect the nervous system, the mind, and everything is so interconnected like that. And as someone like growing up and in my senior year of high school through COVID, like that takes a big toll on my mental health.
Sure.
So learning these practices and being able to realize like I have the control. It's not like life happens, but it doesn't have to like happen to me. I have the power, the tools to go through it and handle it.
Yeah.
So learning all of that was really empowering. I think especially like as like a young Latino woman, like being able to like learn all of this now at this point of my life, it feels like a gift. And I'm really grateful for that because as much as I'm still learning, I do have these tools to guide me throughout anything that comes into my life.
Sure.
So it's amazing.
Yeah, you are years ahead of where I was at your point in life. So that's a blessing for sure. But like, so were you just like locked down during COVID and just like, I need to just research something like and just curious, and that's kind of how you went down this rabbit hole?
Yeah, pretty much. It's honestly, everything just got so still during COVID. And at first, like, I think like any human being who comes into stillness, it's a challenge. Like you don't know what to do with yourself. Like all the stimulation, entertainment was gone. And I was struggling with that. And then I kind of just used it as something to propel like spiritual work. And then that came like that awakening of like who I really am and what I'm really here for. Just tuning into that. And I was trying to connect more deeply. And honestly, I wasn't even trying to pursue this path of like holistic wellness. It just kind of entered into my life. And through like those studies, I just became more passionate about it because it's understanding the body and the mind in a way that I was never taught before. It's not like the Western medicine kind of way or Western perspective.
Yeah.
So.
It's funny, like I always look at COVID like that too. I think there were people who like just kind of like fell apart during that time period, and rightfully so. It was a weird time.
Yeah.
But there were other people who like really flourished because they kind of saw the opportunity in having that stillness, as you put it. And I think, yeah, for me, I agree 100%. Like I think I found myself, at least on a far deeper level, during that time period and like figured shit out that I've been wondering for forever, basically about myself and my own capabilities. So let's kind of start, I don't know, kind of breaking it down, I think, a little bit. Let's do medicine first, right?
Okay.
because that's like we all know about like healthy eating to a degree, right? But I think a lot of people genuinely think there's only one way of medicine, and that like anybody who is talking about holistic healing or any of these different things is just kind of like one of these hippies in the woods somewhere. I feel like that's like the image that comes to mind.
Yeah.
But like I know it's getting a little bit more popular. I done like acupuncture recently, and I was introduced to somebody who like does holistic medicine through that way. But like even I've heard somebody, Big Sean talks about it on one of his records, where like he had a problem with his heart, and the doctor was telling him he needed to have like this crazy surgery and go on like all these drugs, and then he went to a holistic doctor and they prescribed him something, and then like the doctors were like in shock that it was like a miracle that it was completely gone, whatever condition he had. Yeah. So let's kind of break that down a little bit, like the school of thought when it comes to holistic medicine and how that kind of differs from what we're traditionally used to as far as, doctors here in the States and things like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes down to like in the West, like they consider the body and the mind separate from each other, and they see things in a very like logical way.
Yeah.
And it's just ingrained that like if there's an issue in the body, you have to go into surgery or start taking like drugs and different pills to get that. And even with things like mental illnesses and people suffering with mental health, it's like the first guidance they're getting is to, go on some kind of medication.
Right, antidepressants, yeah.
And it's just, I think it's all shifted from the earth in a way. Like the act of nature being in our lives. Like we're so distracted and so busy, and we live very active lifestyles that we like neglect to care for the body and connect with nature and integrate that in. And what I love about like natural medicine, whether if it's from the eastern side of the world or even like Western naturopathic practices, it's all about returning back to nature and using that for the guidance. Yeah. So if there's an imbalance in the body, it's like it's saying that you need to go through the layers to get into what's going on. And there are natural ways of doing that. You don't need to go through surgery to get anything removed, but like doing some reflective work. A lot of the physical problems that occur in the body start in the mind or in the way that we're perceiving the world. So it's a lot of like deconditioning that comes with it.
Right.
And with like Eastern medicine in particular, traditional Chinese medicine, they consider like the body to be a part of nature, and like nature, we flow throughout the seasons. Every season our energy changes, like whether we want to admit it or not. Like we do have energy in our body, we are a part of this energetic world, even though it's not you're not able to see it. But in the winter, you treat your body differently than you would in the summer. They're two totally different energies. And I think a lot of the reason why there's so much like disease in this country is because everyone's just always living the same and like not changing their energy, their food, their movement throughout the seasons. Right. So people are just always living on the go, always rush. I call it like yang energy, really fiery. Right. Heat. Yeah. And like that's why there's like a lot of inflammation in the body. That's like one of the main causes of like chronic illness here. So it's like we really need to slow down and like take that message from Earth to flow with it and to care for the body, care for the earth. Like they're both intertwined. If you care for yourself with like this awareness, you're inevitably helping the earth as well. Right.
Yeah, I think we forget that there were people here long before any of us, and they didn't have like this technology and med school and all this stuff, but they still somehow survived. And they had far more complicated lives than we do right now. So it's funny how we kind of forget that. And yeah, I think it's also like to your point about it all being connected. I don't know if you ever read the book, The Body Keeps Score.
I've read it, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, trauma and all these different things, like, yeah, they're like a mental thing that like affect our emotions, but they also physically have effects on our body, and that's just proof right there of like the concept of like everything is intertwined with one another, because I think a lot of people, again, are kind of going to write all that stuff off as like there's no way what happens in your mind affects your body and this, that, but in the most simplest form, when you are sad, when you are depressed, when you are, going through some sort of traumatic experience, like if you feel that weight coming across on your body, and even when it comes to stress from like work and overworking and things like that, even if you're not physically like exhausting yourself, the fact that you're mentally stressed out from your week has an effect on you that kind of, will bring you down in some certain way that'll make you crash physically, right? So I think it's important to recognize all of those things. And that was one thing that was fascinating to me about the acupuncturist when I first went, was because they would be like, I'd tell like, oh, I have like a leg pain, and they'd be like, oh, well, that's connected to this, and it was something like completely opposite than just like my leg. And that was definitely like a little bit like, I feel like I don't know if I'm being bullshitted by this or not. Like it feels a little bit wacky that like my gut is affecting this random thing that has nothing to do with it. But I mean, yeah, it does make sense in the fact that I guess everything is just like, we're just this one system operating in conjunction with each other, I guess, right?
It's an ecosystem.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's such a good way to put it. So I do want to talk about healthy eating as well, right? So we were talking about this before we started recording, but like in our community in particular, we don't eat a lot of healthy food. Like the traditional food that we grew up eating is not healthy. A lot of fried food, a lot of salt, a lot of those different things. I know my mom used to think that it was healthy just because it was made at home meant that it was healthy food for you. So that's obviously not the truth. You could cook a lot of terrible things for yourself at home. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit, like your journey into discovering cleaner eating and how that has had an effect on you kind of from where it started to where you are now.
I would say what was like the most powerful is like understanding where like the food is being sourced. So like in my household, I wouldn't say we grew up eating unhealthy, but like we always had like the rice, the beans, the chicken. Of
course, yeah.
There was less like vegetables and like fresh produce that was in it. And for me, that's where I learned like is the most medicinal, like food that is actually derived from the earth, grown locally from the farms that you can eat. It's like it's medicine from the earth in that way. If you consider that we're all energy, that's the most potent energy that you can support your body with. So it's just learning like all the different properties of food and how like some foods are cooling, like vegetables. That's which our body needs if we're, you know, always active. And if we're consuming a lot of meat, which a lot of people in our community does, it causes inflammation because meat is very heat forming on the body.
Sure.
So it's like learning like the different energetic properties of food and then pairing them together to support your body. So if most of our people, I think in America, but also it's a global thing, that we're always like doing so much, so active, so stressed as well. And you're eating food that is inflammatory to the body, to the gut. It's going to cause more stress on the body and in the mind. So it's like learning that like just through these changes of diet, you're able to better like regulate the body and then regulate what comes with life. And it's really powerful for me. So like I said, it started with learning where to source the food. A lot of the food that we do get in this country is sadly not good for us in the sense that it's not sourced and grown well. Right. So there's like, you need to take it into consideration the soil of the produce. Is it grown organically or sprayed with like all this shit? It's like grown onto the wheat and the vegetables as well. And we don't really consider how like the effect that has on the body, but our bodies are not meant to like dissolve chemicals and pesticides internally.
And you see it with like the jumbo strawberries that like are way larger than or the fact that we can get strawberries year round. Like
that's it as well.
That's like, those are red flags I began to notice. Like, this is probably not the best for me. Like, I know I'm not supposed to be to get this when it's out of season, but here we are in the supermarket.
The red flags just like keep growing too. But that as well, like a lot of the main principles of like eating cleanly is like eating locally, what's growing in this season at this time in the environment you're in. Like pineapples are not growing in New Jersey right now, or bananas, and we're always getting it sourced from like Mexico or from South America, and it's always there. But if you're eating for like different seasons and different environments, is that serving your body for what you're in now? You're not, because we want to be really adaptable people, adapting to whatever comes, even when stress is in our lives, knowing how to adapt and handle it. When the body's already under stress, you can't adapt in that way. So it's using food to source you through that. So eating locally, trying to eat organic, it's really hard in this country because it's so freaking expensive and makes it so inaccessible. But I do believe that like the more people who like go for these choices and make it more aware that this is better for us, the more demand we'll be seeking for it, and hopefully that will make its change in time to make it more accessible. But definitely taking those into consideration. And I think even with eating clean, a lot of people think they have to like give up everything they enjoy or
Right.
like
That's
quit.
my first inclination when I hear
Yeah.
eating clean is like I can't enjoy food anymore.
No, definitely not. And you don't need to go vegan or like quit
Right.
meat forever. There's
Yeah.
just a way of sourcing it and looking for where it's coming from. Like if your chicken or beef is like coming from an animal that was not treated well or like filled with what's the word? Injections,
right,
like
right.
all of that shit.
Yeah.
Then you know that that's the energy of that animal is coming into
Sure.
you, and that's going to affect you in some way.
Right.
So I myself do eat meat, but I like to source it from like farms that raise their animals humanely, who feed them like natural fed
Right.
ingredients. So that way I know I'm giving my body the best nutrients from
Sure.
that animal. So it's like taking in the energy of just everything, and that's where you begin to notice a change in your own body.
Right. Right. So what does this look like though in a practical sense, right? Because I barely have enough time, it feels like, to cook like actual meals. You know, I'm like constantly ordering out when I tell myself I'm not going to, but I run out of time.
Yeah.
So like you said, we all have really busy schedules, particularly in this country, and people are running around. If you have a crazy schedule, or you know, it's a little bit more difficult, like what are practical approaches we could be taking to try and clean up our diet a little bit, but not be like stressed in it being like another job to go find eating healthy,
Yeah.
you know?
Okay, so I would say like the first thing is to make sure you're eating like vegetables, some sort of like hopefully local seasonal produce that's there, and making that the priority. Like fiber necessary for your gut, taking in that earth medicine there.
Okay.
And then from there you find your source of protein and a grain that goes along with it. So that can look like a variety of things, whether you're eating a salad or like a grain bowl with it, or like even if you go for like a burger or a sandwich or something, just knowing where the ingredients are being sourced from, like choosing places that prepare their food well, like if you choose to eat out. It's just knowing how like the energetic effect it will have on your body. So like some days you will want something that may not be the best for you, but if you still want it, you don't need to hold guilt. Like we don't want to hold guilt over food.
Yeah, I like
creates
that.
like that unhealthy relationship,
Yes.
which we're not trying to get involved with.
Sure.
So it's like saying, okay, I know this may affect me in some way. Maybe preparing your body for that, if it's like eating a fruit before that or not, or just taking the guilt away from it and enjoying food for itself. That's a great way to go about eating.
Right.
So you just like want to have the awareness of what's good for you, but not holding guilt or shame onto yourself at all for what you consume.
I like that. Sounds a lot more doable to me. Like when you put it in that way, that sounds like, okay, I think I can like actually get on board with that. but it's crazy because, you know, when you talk about communities like ours, like things like diabetes are so regular, and you know, obesity in America in general is a problem. You know, so it obviously has an effect on our physical body, and I think a lot of people already realize that. But you had made a post on Instagram that I thought was interesting that I want to kind of expound upon, was the idea of how it has effect on your mental health, right? Yeah. And in this country, we obviously have a mental health crisis where even though maybe some of the stigma is gone, a lot of people still aren't getting the help that they need, and via, you know, whatever therapy, but also I think not understanding the other component of it, like we talked about with, and when it comes to your body. And I know traditionally growing up, again, when it comes to our community, it's like pray away, you know, the mental health issues and things like that, right? And obviously it's far more complicated than that. So I want to hear kind of your perspective when it comes to food, how that affects people's mental health, you know, in this particular time.
Yeah, so the food we eat is obviously powerful, and our bodies are interconnected in a way that if your gut is imbalanced, or it's like taking in a lot of like inflammatory foods that are stressed, it signals stress to the rest of the body, including the nervous system.
Right.
So that all communicates. Our body is really intelligent in that way. So if the body is going through a lot, that's when the mind starts to act up as well.
Sure.
So, you know, when you're dealing with a stressful life situation, you're not caring for yourself in any way, whether it's food or just the choices you make by coping, whether it's like not going to therapy or doing your own reflective work, that just all builds up into the body, and that's just energy that's being held within. And then the mind, that's when the mind gets busy. So like when it comes to dealing with mental health, it's all about like coming into the presence and realizing like what can you do for yourself in this moment, and you know, stop reflecting on the past or the future. And like that's anxiety is when you're like anxious about the future,
Mm-hmm.
connected to the future. Depression is like when you're in the past, you can't get over the past.
Sure.
That's what I've learned. And when you see food as like something to empower you, something medicinal, even herbs as well, like different herbs have different properties to assist the body, assist the energy that we have. It's all interconnected in the way that it starts in the gut, it goes throughout different organs, and it affects the mind. In Chinese medicine, they say how like not every organ, but there's like 7 specific organ pairings that connect directly with our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So like feelings of the heart, when the heart is imbalanced energetically, it causes like a lot of like sadness and despair, loneliness, detachment that we feel in the mind.
Mm.
Or the kidneys, that relates to fear and anxiety. If your kidneys are out of balance, that's what it connects to. So it's like we're really working on trying to reset how our body is. And when it comes to the food we eat, like if you're eating food that just does not go well throughout the body, was not created to support our bodies, our mind is not going to be happy with that.
Right.
And sometimes it goes deeper than just food as well, but just the way you treat yourself in general. I think the emphasis goes on food is because it's all about showing like an act of love to yourself.
Right. I was going to say, yeah.
And if you're just not seeing your body in that way or not treating yourself as if you're deserving of that love, that's when the mind takes over.
Yeah, that's it's like an act of presence, to your body, right? And I think that it's like it starts there, where if you happiness and fulfillment and all these different things, I think if you were to kind of put it all together and talk about what exactly it is, like if you wanted to break it down to one very simple word, it would just be like self-awareness, and that self-awareness being knowing what makes you happy, what makes you unhappy, what triggers you, what doesn't, what brings out positive things and what brings the negative things. And then your body obviously being the same thing, having that same sort of self-awareness as to what makes you feel good, what doesn't, I just think it's interesting to me. I just think it's so fascinating. Like, again, I started by saying that, but like how proactive you have to be just to be like simply happy.
Yeah.
And it sounds daunting and it almost sounds like, like, fuck, what's the point of like, I do all this work just to be normal. But, it's also, I think, an opportunity to tap into yourself, I think, in a way that a lot of people don't, A lot of people don't go that deep. A lot of people will stumble through life being somewhat unhappy and they're not really sure why. They just think it's the norm and that's why they drink with their friends every single weekend and that's what they look forward to, right?
Yeah.
And all those different things. And listen, there's nothing wrong with having fun and letting off some steam and things like that. But I think, the overarching thing of what we've been talking about is just like digging a bit deeper beneath the surface and asking those questions that most people kind of take for granted, I think.
Yeah, like why do you want to escape your life?
Yes.
Why are you trying to run away or distract yourself with these activities? It's like sometimes you avoid those questions, but in the act of avoidance, you're not getting anywhere you want to be. You're not assisting yourself into a place of presence and joy.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like for people who are happy or living lives where they feel fulfilled, it's a daily practice. It's like the healing journey. You don't just one day wake up healed and happy for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I love that you say that because that's my biggest pet peeve with wellness, like personalities or whatever it is. They all like they speak as if they've figured out the secret sauce and now everything is fucking amazing and they never have a bad day. And that's so frustrating to me because it's so misleading to people who are listening to that or watching it, and then what their sort of advice was worked for a little bit, and then now like they're having a bad day and they're like, fuck, I must be broken because this advice that somebody gave me, it seems like they have the greatest life ever now, it's not working for me. So I love that you talk about it's like a daily practice, each and every day you have to get up and work towards it.
Yeah, and it's like it changes every day, honestly. And like our emotions shift, and I think a big like impactful lesson I've learned like through yoga and Chinese medicine, as it's like both interconnected with that Eastern wisdom, is that like life, like the seasons change. Anything that comes up. Like we don't have any external control, and that can cause a reaction in the body, an emotional reaction. And I think it's been like so conditioned for us to like be turned away from like sadness and anger and say like, no, these are negative emotions. No, I shouldn't be feeling this. I should be avoiding it. But it's like surrender to the emotion. we're meant to feel it. It's coming
Yes.
into the body for a reason.
Yes, 100%. I think it's like, yeah, you hit it on the head where we're told to kind of run away from these feelings and like to just like get it out of our mind or distract ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think you have to realize like you're feeling this way for a reason, and you have to ask yourself that question: what is like the overarching thing that is making me feel this way? You know, and it's not fun. It's far easier to just go into escapism and eat a bunch of comfort food and binge drink and smoke, whatever it might be for you. But I think if you really want to get to the bottom of it and you're really trying to progress yourself and your life and make it better day by day, it's like those hard questions, you just can't avoid them. You have to kind of dig deeper and stumble through it and figure out like what's beneath all those feelings.
Yeah, and like just realizing how like everything in this life is changing, everything is temporary. Like what's present now, whether if it's dark, it's not going to last. Just surrendering to what that is, letting it serve as a lesson, whether if it's a breakup or emotional breakdown or just a major change in life. Just letting that serve for what it's supposed to, and it'll naturally flow away.
Yeah.
And it's like connecting to the earth for those like little signs and lessons. Like for me, that's what I find so beautiful about it. Like realizing how interconnected we are with the earth and how like she's there to show us like it's okay. We're going to be okay.
Right. No, I love, you just touched on something I've been like diving into, the idea of like impermanence, and just you have to accept it, right? And it's like it can either make you incredibly anxious when you think about the idea that the good stuff won't last forever, right? Or on the flip side of it, it can make you appreciate it and cherish it just a little bit more. And then on the other side of that, I love it because that means that the pain, like you said, you got to have a relationship or whatever it might be, you're having a bad day, that's also impermanent. That's not something that's going to last forever, and it will pass, So I think just like trying to live in flow of life and take it as it comes and try to relinquish some of that control, knowing that there's like some sort of greater force at work that like it knows what it's doing at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's why like meditation, that's when it comes in handy. Like when you feel like the mind is taking over or life is like controlling you, like you feel stuck in that way, which is a genuine human thing to feel. Like it's valid to feel that way, but turning inwards and like using that for the reflection, or just like closing your eyes and taking like breaths into stillness, you're able to connect to that essence of being present and realizing how like what's current in the mind, that's not who you are in the body, in your life. It's just a moment, it's just an experience, right? So like disconnecting from all of these things that we feel like are us or have power over us, and realizing like no, like we are more than that. Like we are not of the mind or of these things, so we have the tools to go through it.
Right. Yeah, I love that, because it's like the voice in your head is not a factual, like it's not all facts, it's not all knowing, like it's just random shit you've collected, and it's like processing in some sort of way and telling you information, and right?
Just let it be there. You don't need to like entertain it or go back and forth, which is like it's so easy to do.
Right.
But just letting it be, and then letting yourself like just breathe in that way. Like life is always going to like come in its own waves. So just because you're someone who's working on themselves or have like gone to a certain level of your healing journey doesn't mean that your life is like smooth and perfect the rest of the time. Like life just happens, things occur, and you have no control over that, only as to how you react to it and how you treat yourself, how you treat others. So it's like using that power to guide you through it all.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. Other thing I want to talk about is, because you bring up high school and then choosing like a different route, so I fucking love this, because it's like disruption and like breaking societal norms, and this is like right up my alley. But I think a lot of people have dreams or ideas and want to pursue something, and even having spoken to you a little bit when we first met, and then kind of seeing your social media, like, you've gone out and traveled a lot at a young age and all these different things. And a lot of people dream of that. They talk about like that being their dream, and they just can't do it now. They have to put it off because of whatever reason it is, right? And I think, maybe there is some truth in it. I don't know everybody's situation, But for the most part, that's just fear that's been ingrained in us in thinking that, when we do something different, it's wrong, right? Like the people in high school who are different are ostracized, the ones who react differently or dress differently or, don't fit into the boxes of this curriculum. They're the ones who are kind of, they get in trouble or they get bullied or they get whatever it is, right? That's just human nature, unfortunately, of our society. So take me through, first, what year did you graduate high school?
2021.
Wow. Okay. So this is all like, that's crazy. So for me, I did like college and I dropped out. I did it again. I dropped out and I stumbled through like eventually graduating after like 5 years of just dropping in and out. But I don't necessarily regret it because during that time I was just going out and doing what I wanted to do while dropping out simultaneously. But at the same time, it's definitely like I know a lot of my friends went to school for shit that they don't like, and are now like later in life trying to figure out like how to change, completely, and get off this path that they really feel like they may have never really signed up for knowingly. Yeah. So take me through your mind a little bit. Like, what did your parents think? All these different things. Like when you graduate high school and you're just like, I'm taking this complete left turn, and I'm gonna go like, study with some yogis and like talk about, holistic medicine and things like that.
Yeah, like that was like the best decision I've ever made to have chosen that.
Yeah.
And I honestly hold so much gratitude to like that younger version of me because it's still kind of shocking that I am where I am now,
right,
considering where I was then. And the idea just like came to me. Like I went through like the whole college application process, and I had dreams of moving to New York City, going to like NYU or something.
Right.
And I was just, it became more and more like it wasn't the right time for me. Like I was getting some kind of like signals that's just to stop and to like pursue something different.
What were the signals, if you don't mind sharing, if they're not too personal?
I think a lot of it is intuitive as well. It just didn't feel right in my body.
Yeah.
Like your body like naturally communicates with you in ways that's like it's pretty hard to explain, whether it's just like a thought or like seeing something visual outside.
Right.
Just the idea of going just felt unsettling with me. Like when your body, I think it's like a gut feeling. When it communicates with you, you should listen to that.
Right.
And I kind of flowed with how everything went. Like I said, I knew I wanted to travel and I wanted to learn. So I went for the holistic nutrition education. I had a family member who pursued it and said it was a really amazing experience. So I was like, okay, this is new for me, but maybe I'll try it out.
Sure.
And then from there, I knew I wanted to travel. I've never been to Europe, and I wanted to travel alone specifically.
Why alone?
Because I feel like, I don't even know why, honestly, but I've traveled alone to different parts of the world, and it's the most valuable thing. You like put yourself in these unfamiliar environments where you're no one, and you're like forced into growing or into learning something about yourself that you never even knew was there.
Right. Right. And a lot of people, I think that that's crazy also because I think they're scared to be alone with their own thoughts too.
Yeah.
In like the same conversation of escapism, like that's also, I've learned to just, I love being alone, and I'm grateful for that. I don't think it's a negative. I don't think it's like a selfish thing. I think I love my own time to myself, and I think a lot of people fail to kind of do that inner work as well a little bit, and that's why they're scared to take a lot of those trips. But yeah, keep going on about how you did all that.
A lot of it was just like really flowy. I traveled to Barcelona and I like fell in love with like Spain and just the lifestyle. It was very different than living in America, and I really appreciated that experience. But a lot of it was just like learning more about myself, like knowing like I knew that I wasn't. Like I was 18 at the end of high school. I was like, there's still so much to discover about myself and about life. I don't want to jump into like a path or this like 5-year decision and being set for that for life, because I think with COVID, a lot of things like the veil lifted, and people live lives where they aren't happy or things are just fake in that way, and they're stuck in that cycle because it's what's familiar and they don't know what's different. And I didn't want that for myself. And I knew like I don't have to settle in that way. I can take my time discovering like what it is I like to do, what it is I find passion for, what lights me up. Like if I don't know it now, I can take the time to discover it. And that's what I did. And that's when I like really fell in love with just taking care of myself and with the practices of yoga as well. And also like connecting with people, like having conversations that are above surface,
Sure.
like, I mean, below surface,
Yeah.
deep
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah.
And just like connecting with different cultures and different ways of life.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I found fulfillment in. And it's something that I've just held within me. Like even every time I come back from a trip, I notice the difference in returning like to life in America compared to when you're outside of it.
Yeah.
And it's like just holding that within me, how like I have that power in my life to choose what I want.
Yeah.
Like if I've done these decisions, these accomplishments, I know I can, like, I don't ever have to settle with how I choose to live.
Right.
And I hope more people become more aware that they have that power within them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. So when I was 18, I was in a band, and like, so we didn't tour the world, but we like toured around the country, and like, we were like, doing it in a big way. So we really were like in a crappy van, just driving all around the country. And I'm so grateful for that experience. Even though it was within the same country, I saw how so many different people live, and it was like this idea that there's so much more outside of just my hometown, right? Like this little bubble. Particularly, I feel like in New Jersey and places like this, it gets very easy to get caught up in it because we have access to so much over here. There's always something to do in Jersey. You're right outside of New York, depending on where you live. So it can kind of feel like, what else do I really need,
Yeah.
And it's easy to kind of just think this is the way that things are. And I have a lot of friends who have never really ventured outside of, their hometown. And just, I find it harder to connect with them at this point in life because we just have a very different, I think, understanding of the outside world to a degree.
Yeah. And that's like when your awareness expands in that way, like when you've experienced life in that way, things become like more and more not in alignment with you because you're becoming more in aligned with your own being, with your own spirit, if you so will. So when you start to see things or notice your relationships changing in that way as they're not aligning, it's like those are the signals that like there's more for you out there. And like I think that's like a really difficult part of like the healing journey for a lot of people. Like just that transition of realizing how like your home or like the relationships you've been like so used to being around are no longer like at the same place or like are in alignment with you as they were before.
It's lonely.
Yeah.
It's because you're in a very small percentage, unfortunately, right? Like, there are going to be whatever, how many thousand people listen to this, and there's going to be a tiny handful that actually like it does something where they maybe question things. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not to, I hope everybody kind of gets something from it. And it's not to denigrate anybody, but the reality is like most people are unable to get over the fear of stepping outside of their comfort zone, right? And we all have that. I mean, I can speak for myself. When I was traveling and doing these different things that were outside the norm, I had fear that maybe I'm making the wrong decision. I'm watching my friends begin to graduate college and they're getting real jobs and getting, maybe they're getting their first apartment and they're buying a home and all these different experiences that they had before me because I took a different route. And I had a level of fear and anxiety that went along with that. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of people can never get out of their own way and just sort of embrace that and kind of move past it,
Yeah. And it's like a lot of like what surrendering is. Like you may be fearful, but go for it anyways. Like those emotions, they'll come, but if your mind's gonna rule over you, it's gonna stop you from doing what you really want to do.
Right.
If you surrender, you just allow the force of the emotion to take its turn, and you go for it anyway.
Yeah, well, because the fear is normal. It's not abnormal. Like the people that you see doing things that you wish you were doing still have that fear in the back of their mind. They've just accepted it and figured out a way to push past it, right? And that's, to me, the difference between people who like actually go out and make their goals or their dreams come true and those who kind of just sit there wondering about what could have been or one day I'm going to do it,
Yeah.
But I mean, what did your parents think about this? Because I don't have any kids, but I can imagine if like my 18-year-old daughter fresh out of high school is like, I'm going to go travel Europe by myself to find myself. I don't know how good I would feel about, their safety. So what did they think when you were telling them you want to do all this?
They were both like just in shock because they wanted me to go down like that path of like going to college and getting a career. And it's like, my dad's like, this is not like typical. Like this is not what people do. And I'm just like, but why not? Like it's just traveling. And my mom was definitely judgmental at first, but I would say over time, I think as I've began to connect deeper with myself, she's been able to see that and become more supportive of it as she's seen me change in these ways. And she even came with me for like the first week of like my travels in Barcelona.
That's cool.
Like that was her first time in Europe as well, so we had that experience shared with each other.
Yeah.
And then she let me go. She went back home, and then I had that time for myself to explore.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, even now, there's still moments where like my parents aren't really sure what I'm doing.
Right.
Like I finished high school, didn't go to college. I'm a yoga teacher now. It's definitely, I don't think, the norm.
Yeah, of course. Definitely, it's outside the door for sure.
But I think they are really supportive parents, and I'm grateful for like what they've shared and how they've connected with me and guided me to where I am. And yeah, I mean, I'm still gonna continue to explore like myself in this world.
Yeah.
And it's not only like unfamiliar to them, but also just people of this country, the community as well. It's living a life that's just outside of like what you said, the norm or like the standards. It's you get judged upon, but it's just learning how like it's all for you. You're making these decisions.
Yeah.
And that's like when the loneliness comes in again. And I was recently dealing with those feelings as well, because it's just a part of the healing journey. But I was reminding myself, like, I honor my body, I honor my mind, I honor my spirit. This is the path I choose. It's lonely at times, but that doesn't make it wrong.
Yeah.
It's like whatever I'm feeling now, I have the tools to tell me it's not forever. I have the awareness to know how I will align with people who, you know, are on the same wavelength as me, moving through life as me. And just knowing that is what gets me through it and encourages me to keep discovering.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like you can't be the only person, right? Who who thinks this way, you know, so that definitely helps you in those moments. But yeah, it's funny because, so I'm 35 and now reflecting back when I was 18, it seems so ridiculous to me to make, like, depending on where you went to school, a $100,000 investment into 4 years of my life that are going to dictate the next, you know, whatever, 30, 40 years of my life. Like, to ask an 18-year-old to be in that mindset, to know what the fuck they want, fresh out of being in, like, high school is just crazy. And it's so backwards. It makes zero sense whatsoever when you're actually thinking about it in a logical sense. But, like, most people are just so pre-programmed by this is just what people do that they don't actually even look at it from any sort of logical perspective whatsoever.
Yeah. And that's why I think with COVID, that's why I was just like, why would I do that?
Right.
like that's like such like you're making me like make a life decision at this age where it's like there's so much to discover. Like I'm new to this earth. Like I can't make this decision now. So I was like, I rather like if people judge me for making this decision now than living a life where I don't enjoy or I'm not happy.
Yeah.
And it's like at that age, people don't even know what they're passionate about, what they enjoy.
Yeah.
And then they choose a job that, you know, like isn't serving that passion or even serving the earth as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's really backwards.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, we keep thinking everything has to be permanent, right? Like, and maybe that's a form of like trying to control everything. You know, but even for me at this point in my life, I still tell myself, like, the day that what you're doing stops being fun and stops, you know, kind of filling your cup, you have permission to move on and explore something else, you know? And that's something I continue to remind myself of, because I think it also, your identity begins to get so tied into the things that you're doing, you know? And it's like, if I'm not this person who does that, then who am I, right? And I think we have a problem in this world where we have I think a mistaken idea of what identity actually is and who we are, and not knowing that, you know, our job and all those things, they're things that we do rather than who we actually are as a person, you know?
Yeah.
And we have way too much attachment to these things that really just don't make any sense whatsoever, especially when you talk about like the job force, when most jobs don't have that level of attachment to you, right? Like they will lay you off when they need more money, or if they find somebody cheaper, whatever the case may be. And but we're so confused. We're placing so much value in them when it's not reciprocal, you know?
Yeah. I just think it's all about like realizing how life is just like a development of us as like individuals. Like the goal is to really just grow and continue to learn about who we are, and that means like releasing attachments or like these ideas of who we are. And that's why like yoga and meditation, like I'm so grateful to have come across them so early, because I like it's made me realize like I'm Natalie, but like I'm not my name, or I'm not my personality.
Sure.
I'm not like I don't identify as like a yoga teacher, like all these different labels that we place on ourselves. Like you learn through meditation that like the mind, the personality, the ego, the body, they're vehicles, they're tools, they're vessels that we are with in this experience, but it's not who we really are. It's all about like a soul having a human experience.
Right.
And by coming into stillness, connecting with the breath, like getting yourself away from all that stimulation or all that like active energy coming inwards, you realize like all these layers are like kind of blocking you from being who you really are. It gives you that time to like distress, but also reconnect with what we're really here for. And like once you start to practice that, you put it into your daily life as well. And that's just brings you further into like the whole journey and realizing like where you do belong. And it's I don't have words for it.
No, I mean, well, it's like it's just it's your journey, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to make sense for anybody else. And quite frankly, it really doesn't have to make sense to you when you're talking about like trying to find, how it's all like linear in some sort of way. It doesn't really actually have to even trace back that way, right?
Yeah, and it's not linear at all.
100%.
Yeah, they say how like the whole healing journey or just life in general, it comes like in spirals. So like what you're feeling now, it's not going to last forever. And also like even if you feel like you've like healed from something, whether it's trauma or like a relationship, those emotions or those thoughts can still come up.
Yeah.
But it's like it's just a part of the cycle. Like this what is
cyclical.
It? Cyclical.
Yeah, I promise that word too sometimes. I'm proud of myself for getting that one out. But I completely agree. I think it's interesting because I think no person is just one thing, right? Like I don't have just one interest, yet we all like tie our identity into one thing, and then we find it so weird when someone else has multiple things that they're doing, right? Like even like for me, a lot of the people who may know me professionally might know me from radio or DJing and things like that. And now it like blows their mind if I'm podcasting or doing it, or like that's what I've kind of been making my main focus. They can't wrap their brain around it because they're so used to knowing me from just this one thing. And to me, it's like it's so normal. Of course, I'm doing something else. Like I've been DJing and playing music since I was 18 years old. And so like it's crazy to think that I would just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. Like that sounds wild to me. That's like the idea you have that it's just for the next 30 years you're doing the same shit over and over again.
Yeah, and it's like just all about like attachment, like attaching to like those like careers or those like identities where life is meant to be changing. Like if we're really growing, why would we be doing the same thing all of the time?
Yeah.
So it's just like releasing that hold that we have to be like a specific thing, that putting ourselves in our own boxes to like identify with that for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
It's all about like flowing with what comes, flowing deeper into our own being. And sometimes that means completely going a different route than what you've done before. And that's completely valid. It's what happens with this life.
Yeah, no, 100%. But I do want to, because we touched on it, but I want to make sure it's not all sunshine and rainbows on this side. So I think you were telling me, because we were talking about when I met you, were telling me about like these programs where you can like work for it, like in exchange for a place to stay.
Yeah.
But there was one, was it in France? You were saying that like at first you were like, oh shit, I think I'm gonna go. I think I need to go home. Like I don't feel quite comfortable here.
Yeah, I was in South France in Provence, and I was doing like a work exchange on like this in the mountains, and this little French family. It was this little family with their son who was around my age, and they had like this big beautiful piece of land where they did like all their gardening. They ate directly from what they grew, which I loved.
Yeah.
And I was like so attracted to like going over there.
Yeah.
And it was really like something I've never done before. So I went there, and like the first night I was like, oh, I can't do this. I'm gonna leave.
Yeah.
Like it felt kind of isolating at first because it was so new. There was like a French household. I'm American, and I felt like an outsider at first. So I think a lot of the times, like when you put yourself in different environments, like your body is gonna like not stressed, but it's gonna be in shock.
Yeah.
And something I actually reflected on when I was there, it's like a plant. So if you buy like a new plant from a plant store and then you travel, bring that to your home,
Right.
that plant's gonna go through shock, especially if they're not getting the nourishment,
Right.
like the love, the care that their body needs in that time. And like that's completely natural to feel that way. But it's using, yourself, you're using the tools of like love and self-care to like assist you and guide you into like being okay.
Yeah.
Like if my mind took over, then I was like, I can't do this, I can't stay here, because that was just a lot of fear there.
Yeah.
If my mind took over, I never would have had the whole experience I did have.
Exactly.
But it's like giving yourself that time to adapt. And in that time is when growth happens. Putting yourself in those environments that are fearful, uncomfortable, but knowing that there's a greater like cause for it, that you're meant to learn something.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's funny because I've tried to begin to train my brain that when I get uncomfortable in those moments where I'm like panicking and I'm like, I need to get the fuck out of this thing, I'm uncomfortable. I try to train myself into thinking like, oh, this is good. This means like you're going to learn something. You're on to something new. There's going to be growth on the other end of this, right? Like, so I trick my brain into like, when I get those feelings, reminding myself of like, oh, this is like a positive thing. Dive a little bit deeper. You know what I mean? like if you're feeling uncomfortable, that means you should be diving even further into this, because there's something amazing going to kind of happen at the end of it. And I think it's like, you talk about like with the plant, or even just, if you're gardening, it's a labor of love, right? Like it's a process to grow a garden, right? Like you have to dig, you have to put the soil, you have to maintain the plants and like take care of them just for them to ripen and become something, for you to consume and something positive in it, right? There's a whole process that goes into it that's probably not fun for the most part, right? But at the end of it, it's worth it. You got this incredible tomato out of it, whatever it is, right? That you could go in your backyard and you could go cook with, whatever it might be, right? So that, I think, if that's just like the same thing with life, is the path to getting what you want, or getting what fulfills you in that moment, that happiness. It's not going to be always just some fun, like, where you're skipping along the path. It's going to take a lot of work, and sometimes that work is hard. Sometimes that work is not fun. It's scary, but it's all necessary, for your growth as a human being. Yeah,
I think we're just so used to like everything being so like immediate, and when things are not that way, it's a shock on the body. But it's just trusting the process. Like you said, it's a garden. The way you harvest anything, it takes time, and you need the patience and the faith to go through it. And those aren't easy things to attain and to stick by. But it's just understanding like where this will lead to. Like you don't plant a seed and then the next day the fruit is there.
Right.
You need to give it time, and in that time, in that process, that's where all the growth is happening internally. Yeah. And that's what we're there for. We're not here just to experience like the fruits of life. We're here to go throughout all of it, the dirty, the dark, all of it.
Yeah, amen. So, I love these types of conversations. I could do it for 4 hours. But where can people check out more from you? Because I know you offer like consulting services to people and all those different things. Talk about your business, where they could check all that out.
You can follow me on Instagram at Garden of Awareness, or you can go on gardenofawareness.com. I offer holistic healing services, either with nutrition and helping you create, the proper plan and diet plan that works best for your body. Obviously using food as medicine and not restrictive, just learning what your body needs, as well as yoga services, and just someone here to talk and be a life health coach for anyone who's going throughout their healing journey and needs that assistance and guidance.
I love it. Well, Natalie, you're wise beyond your years. I'm excited to see what you end up doing further down the road. You've done amazing so far, so kudos to you.
Thank you so much.
Of course. So it's been a pleasure having you on here. I'm sure we'll dive into another conversation at some point down the line.
Yes.
But thank you so much for hopping on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Man, big shout out to our guest this week, Natalie Ventura, for hopping on the show. She was actually the first in-studio guest that I've had at my new studio spot, so that was exciting to kind of, really just push myself into officially opening this bad boy up, and having that vision come to life is amazing. So big shout out to her. So big shout to her for coming down and wanting to do it in person. And go check out her brand, Garden of Awareness. I think she's just onto something that I think is incredibly important and not spoken about enough. We speak about financial literacy a lot, mental health, and all of that as we should, but also our physical health and the way that it affects everything around us, I think is incredibly important. And the idea of getting back to nature to a degree, and I joked about, being, not being like some hippie living in the woods, that you didn't have to be that in order to like have a focus on your health. And as she was leaving, Natalie said, but I am that hippie in the woods. And that's a beautiful thing. I only say these things because I want to remove the sort of barrier to entry or the stigma around this idea, right? Because what's happened in wellness for a long time is the people that were the faces of these types of movements didn't look like you or I, right? So it was easy to write them off, and they almost became sort of caricatures of the idea of like, positive living, and like they would, I don't know, I just have this vision, and if my dog is in the background rolling around, I'm sorry if you hear that, but I just have this vision of like somebody wearing a drug rug, like the Mexican blankets that like, it looks like a Mexican blanket, but it's like a sweater thing. And they have tribal tattoos, and like their name is Shiloh. And again, no shade to anybody who falls under this category. I'm not trying to denigrate anybody and how they want to present themselves to the world. What I'm saying is that I never saw myself in those people, right? That wasn't an appearance that was, representative of the way that I saw the world. So I just automatically wrote off all of these types of things as just not being for me, right? That they were only for a certain type of person. And now being more mature and being able to look at things and view things that may be different to me, but not judging them and being more curious, I realize these people who have been on this sort of wellness kick, they are onto something. Maybe I don't agree or necessarily want to encompass their entire lifestyle, but the work that they're doing and the discoveries that they've had are incredibly important. So there is something to be learned from them there. So that's why I mentioned, that idea. I just have this idea of hippies in the woods and being really crusty and all those things, which, Natalie definitely was not, and I don't assume everybody is. It's just my own personal stereotype that I think I have that was my own barrier to entry towards like really diving deep into this world. So I'm done rambling about that. I just wanted to address I guess my mindset and for anybody that does have a similar type of stigma when they think about these sort of things, or when they hear about the idea of like going back to nature and they just kind of write it off as some weird like hippie type of stuff. Yeah, I get that it sounds like that, but there is truth and there is power in it. And we as a society have just created this idea that anything that is different than the norm needs to be ostracized and judged, right? And myself included, I fall into that trap as well at times. So just wanted to throw that out there for anybody who might have a similar mindset or similar upbringing. Now, with that said, I want to get y'all's take on some of what we were talking about on today's show. So we'll do that for our Ask a Gringo segment.
Ask a Gringo! I have a question.
All right, so for this week's Ask a Gringo segment, I just simply wanted to ask a few really simple questions. I just kind of left it pretty wide open, but I asked people at DJ Dramos on Instagram if they grew up eating healthy and or their thoughts on holistic medicine. Now, I got a few different responses here. Let's see, at Maritza.m04, she says, no, I grew up in poverty. I didn't start eating healthy until I was in my 30s. And then she followed it up, I believe, with a DM here. Yeah, she said, I just had my first cooked salmon recently. So I think that was kind of what I was talking about a little bit before, the barrier to entry, right? The haves, the have-nots. If you grew up in poverty, if you grew up struggling, the last thing on your mind was being very specific about the way that you were shopping for groceries and going out of your way to places that provided you with the highest quality of food, right? Again, in survival mode, you are just looking to get by. So whatever is the cheapest and most accessible thing, that is what you are going to be consuming, right? And I love that now in your 30s, you've begun to explore and recognize that there is a whole nother world out there that you were not aware of, and that there is an opportunity to be bettering yourself through what you consume, when it comes to food and things like that. I think that's why I want to bring up these types of conversations and have these types of guests, because, just because we were brought up a certain way and there are certain norms in our society doesn't mean that they are right, and doesn't mean that they're right for us for the entirety of our entire lives. I think we have to constantly be questioning why we do things and constantly be looking for a better way to do things, right? And a part of that is this body that we encompass, right? This is the physical vessel that allows us to go out and live our dreams and go out and have experiences with loved ones and just literally get up in the morning, right? And we need to take care of it. We only have one body, at the end of the day. And it's all, intertwined, like we were talking about, with your mind, and everything is connected. And if you're feeling like shit physically, there's no way that mentally you're going to be able to give your best, right? And vice versa. So I think that it's just being aware of those things and just trying to do better, and understanding that just because we were brought up thinking something was a certain way doesn't mean that it is like the Bible and it's a fact, right? Things can always change. And I think things always should be changing. Let's see. I got a couple just like really quick comments from people. At TJ Charity says, I love holistic medicine. And yeah, it's funny. I had my first experience with it, like I was telling Natalie, this last year I did acupuncture, but like besides acupuncture, I literally didn't know what the fuck acupuncture was. I just thought they stuck needles in you and it like somehow was just like a stress reliever. I didn't realize that it was like them focusing on problems that you're having with your body or your mind, whatever it might be, right? Like I went in there thinking I was just getting poked with needles, and then they began like asking you what types of like maybe symptoms or ailments you deal with. And I've always, since I was a kid, had problems with my stomach. And, there was, I can't remember specifically, but it was very eye-opening, her talking about like certain things were connected to that like problem that I'm having with my gut. And her saying, that I probably had what they call a leaky gut, which is caused by like too many, basically prescription medication, right? Like I am somebody who gets a lot of sinus infections, so I constantly have to get like a Z-Pack, and antibiotics. And the acupuncturist was telling me how, oftentimes when you are taking those things so much, it begins to create a leaky gut, and that affects the way that you physically feel and your body and all these different things, right? And again, that's not something I was ever made aware of by a doctor, and they're more than happy to prescribe antibiotics to you and get you on your way, right? So it's just the idea to me of looking at things from a different lens. And listen, I'm not pushing anybody in either direction. I think that both have their place in this world. I've heard, like I mentioned that Big Sean story, I've heard a lot of crazy, like, positive holistic medicine stories, and I think that they're, in emergency situations, of course, like a normal doctor, traditional doctor, I should say, is probably your best bet. But I think, it's just, again, questioning everything and recognizing that there's not just one way of doing things. And just because we were brought up thinking things were a certain way, it doesn't mean that it has to be that way for the entirety of our lives. Just keeping that in mind. And last comment I'll read here, because, you always got to have both perspectives. At Marty Abe 84 says, holistic is BS. And I think that, listen, to each their own. There's stigma around it. And I'm not going to lie, I think there's certain parts of it that I find hard to believe when it's like, and this is just a rough example, but like I have a leg pain and they're like, oh, you're probably having a leg pain because your gut is leaking and then it leads to this or whatever. And that necessarily wasn't the correlation that was being made when I went to the acupuncturist. But there were certain things like that were like, oh, this is connected to this. And I was like, how the fuck is that connected to that, right? So I am an optimistic skeptic is what I would always say. right? I am willing to learn. I am more than happy to try, and I'm excited to be proven wrong for being skeptical about particular things. But I will say, I've been lucky enough that my primary physician is somebody who believes in both, right? He believes in first trying a holistic approach towards whatever it is that you're feeling, and then if that doesn't work, he then is inclined to move towards more traditional sort of practices and medications and things like that. So I appreciate that, and I think for me that works. And I'm obviously very lucky that I've found somebody who operates kind of in both spaces. But that's kind of where I sit and where I stand with this whole idea of everything. And again, like, I'm just dipping my toe into this. This conversation with Natalie is probably the most in-depth conversation I've had in regards to, health when it comes to eating right and holistic medicine and things like that. So for me, just like maybe for many of you, I'm being educated by these conversations. And again, it's just about questioning things and trying to figure out if there's a better way of doing something, if there's a better way of my human, doing my human existence here on planet Earth, right? And that's what I hope all of us are striving to do. So that's why I love these types of conversations. And even if you are not a believer in it or you are a skeptic, I think it's interesting to kind of just hear different perspectives, because I think somewhere in the middle there is, truth, right? And I'm not saying either side is lying to you or anything like that. What I'm saying is that somewhere in the middle, I think everything comes together where the people who are celebrating the idea of like something like holistic medicine, like somewhere in the middle is like, oh, that really does have a benefit here, right? Maybe it's not beneficial in every area of, medicine or healing, but yeah, they're right. Like in this particular area or these areas, this is an incredible sort of thing that I should try first before anything else, because it's a far healthier option for me and my body. Just again, fruit for thought at the end of the day. And man, thank y'all for chiming in on these questions. Again, at DJ Dramos on Instagram. Now, with that said, let's quickly tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
Man, so I'll keep this really short. I know we went a little bit long on today's show, which I absolutely loved. I'd prefer to just be able to have those conversations kind of run their course and us really be able to deep dive into things. But again, big shout out to Natalie Ventura for hopping on the show today. Garden of Awareness is her brand. And again, like, this to me is trying to do better by learning more, right? Learning about shit that we weren't taught about. And I'm not pushing anybody in any direction. I'm just wanting people to question and to understand that there's always another way to do things, right? I consider myself like a disruptor, a societal disruptor. So my livelihood is, and my mindset, my philosophy of how I live my life is question everything. And there's always a better way to do something, a better way to optimize, my life, my existence, and everything that I do. And it's about constantly finding, a new way to do something. Right? Because again, tradition is great and I love tradition, but that doesn't mean we have to be married to every old world idea, right? Like if we were stuck in our old ways, we would still be in horse and buggies right now, right? But it's the idea of embracing new ideas and better ways of doing things, and then also having the courage to understand that there is probably a different way of doing something, right? Different than what we were taught. And also, when you know better, you do better, right? I love that little sort of I love that contribution from Maritza talking about the idea of now in her 30s she's going on this journey because before that she grew up in a life of poverty and didn't have the privilege to look into healthy eating and make food that much of a focus and a healthy lifestyle, right? Because she was in survival mode. Her and her family were in survival mode, which I completely understand, and I've been there as well. So now that you have the privilege, or maybe you're, eventually somewhere down the line, if you are right now currently just kind of grinding it out and figuring it out, put this in the back of your head and understand that when the time comes, when you are put in the position that you can, it's an opportunity to do better by yourself, right? And to maybe lead a little bit of a healthier and more fulfilled life, that's all that I'm kind of just putting this information out there for. Is we're all on this journey. We're on this journey of growth and trying to be better, and educating ourselves on things that are a bit different than what we grew up with. I think is obviously the first step in all of that. Now, with that said, thank y'all so much for tuning in. I'll catch you on Thursday for our Thursday Trends episode. The book still available, justbe.nyc. You got some merch on there. We're about to drop some new stuff in a few weeks that I'm really excited about. This little jacket I'm wearing is a preview of that. But that's it, man. I'll catch you on Thursday, like I said. Until then, stay safe, and we'll talk soon. Peace.